Okay, I may have seen this episode more times than any other Star Trek episode just to see the differences between the second pilot and the series as it went along. And there's some things to talk about here too now that we see it in a completely restored version. We'll talk about it in a moment. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and season 1, episode 3 in the original broadcast order, Where No Man Has Gone Before, is what we're talking about today. We have in this episode, once again, as we did in the first two, we see a rec room. Kirk and Spock are playing chess, and we divide our time watching the background characters and how they first imagined the Kirk and Spock relationship, which is kind of a contrast to each other, where Kirk is instinct and Spock is reason. And it shows two sides of Kirk. Later, of course, when they added McCoy to the series, they have this triumvirate, this emotional versus logical versus brilliant mind. And so what we have here is an early stab at that. We see one of Kirk's trademark speeches that he gives to Gary Mitchell, and some details that I've never noticed before. I was thinking at that point that all of the uniforms were the same as in the cage. In the cage, the uniforms were camel colored all the way all across the crew. And in the case of this, once again, Command had green, and it was, of course, one of those that as film faded and local stations didn't always adjust their color properly, this green was kind of, it was too subtle really to get through on most transmitters, most televisions of the time. So we have the green uniforms that are held by Spock and Kirk. Both of them have command badges, whereas I find kind of interesting that as they show some of the other characters, for instance, the Doctor has an engineering badge, and Mitchell has a science badge, even though that he's a helmsman or navigator. So they weren't quite certain how they were going to use the badge designs, I think, by this point, but rather interesting details that I wasn't able to catch before over more faded and not as detailed film. So we see something that looks all brand new, and we see where Kirk's character developed, and it's very interesting to see. We have a better rendering of the galactic barrier, and of course the ship moving through the updated special effects. We have a flashback, not a flashback, but we have an anecdote that Mitchell gives about his time in the academy when Kirk was teaching at the academy. He was a lieutenant and an instructor at the academy. They didn't say what subject it was. They just said, if you're in Lieutenant Kirk's class, you either swim or sink. At any rate, he mentions throwing the lab tech, which Kirk says, I almost married her, and we're thinking that probably was Carol Marcus that was revealed in Star Trek II. That was also the first episode where somebody mentions being in the academy with Kirk. Usually it's a death sentence. In any time after that where anybody is mentioned as having known Kirk in the academy, or that Kirk knew in the academy, they don't survive the episode, and Mitchell did not, of course. Spock was odd in the early episodes in which, when he was on the bridge, would be shouting, and I'm not really sure why he did that. In conversation, of course, he was like we remember him through all the other shows, but he would, in making reports, he would shout as if the bridge was a whole lot bigger room than it really was. He was the only one that did it too. Everybody else seemed to talk at a indoor conversation level, but I don't know exactly what the direction was in that. I always tried to freeze frame and find out, what dates that Kirk supposedly was born. And of course, that's set in canon anyway, so we won't discuss it here. Of course, good performance put in by Sally Kellerman, who this is before she was in the movie MASH and before she was as well known an actor. Everybody else did a pretty good job with it. We have Scotty is the engineer by now. Sulu is not on the bridge. He is in astrophysics, but talks about the math of the possibility. Anyway, they have the doctor who is not the regular doctor. They cast DeForest Kelley after this, of course, and while he is not as close with the captain as McCoy would be, you see that he's not afraid to say what he thinks in front of him. So this is the cast they put together. Now, despite what Roddenberry has said in some of the history that the networks were kind of scared that he put in a multiracial cast, you don't see much of it in this pilot. Everybody is pretty white except for Sulu, who's not even on the bridge crew at this point. And the story I've heard most recently is that NBC said, go back and put in the more diversity. We want to have more minorities represented in this. This was a policy that NBC was trying to do across all of their programs as they went to color television. They wanted to have more African Americans and more Asians represented. Now, word is that at first Roddenberry and George Takei didn't get along that well, and did not really want him in the show, but the network insisted, and so it became a bit more diverse when the show went into regular production. So all of this in Where No Man Has Gone Before, it's worth seeing again. Even if you have all the lines memorized by heart, you'll see some new things in the clearer and better color-corrected version that they have here. So I recommend it to you. Also, remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're going to do all of the original series episodes, and then when we're done with that, we're going to the next generation. So we hope that you'll join us on this ride. And in the meantime, until next week when we do another couple of videos, don't go far.